Hello and welcome to another episode of Discover with Spinetti. Today we're talking about mental toughness, and today is episode number 130 on Discover with Spinetti. We're talking about mental toughness because everybody wants to perform at their absolute best all the time in order for them to live their best life and feel accomplished and feel like they are self-fulfilled. And what better way than to learn from Larry Basham, who is a gold medalist in rifle shooting. So one of the things in terms of peak performance, and peak performance means that you are performing your best every single day, irrespective of whether or not you feel like doing something. And how you get there is not by chance. How you get there is through a certain kind of practice. Now, Larry developed something called a mind management system so that you can actually get that kind of mindset and that kind of mind, allure, or that kind of mind strength on a daily basis. Because as you know, sometimes you feel good, sometimes you feel bad. But then when you do feel good or whether you feel bad, you should be performing at your peak so that you can maintain consistency. And we all know that consistency breeds success. So what is the optimal framework for us to think about when it comes to peak performance? It is a mind shift in us to think about so that we can win, whether or not we've just lost something. So let's say, for instance, at work, let's say you're a salesperson, you're trying to close a deal and you couldn't close that deal. And then so basically that's a loss. So that allows you to keep going after the loss because no one likes to be rejected. So that's one component or one advantage of having that strong mindset, the peak performance. The second is during the actual game or during work, when you're trying to sell to someone, when you're trying to sell whatever it is, whether it's software or something, you want to know that you are at your peak, even if you're not performing at your best, because that requires a lot of toughness. If you're falling behind, you've made some mistakes in what you said, you didn't ask the proper questions, you see the potential client is kind of veering off a little bit. It's not a loss of hope. It's simply, it's a strategy of shifting, but it requires you to be strong in your mind. And the third is to be able to train well after the fact, or even before the fact, before work, before meeting with that client for sales, so that, or whatever it is, I'm just using sales as an example, so that you can perform your best during the game or during the sales process or during work or whatever it is that you're undertaking. So those are the three things. It's immediately after, during, and then way before the actual game or the actual event. Now, Larry describes two different processes for us to think about when it comes to peak performance and mental toughness. The first one is that to think primarily of the process. When you think primarily of the process, you're thinking about doing things correctly as opposed to achieving certain things. So he describes an example of someone golfing, right? Someone who is, who wants to golf, who wants to win the championship, but he wasn't able to. And so he hired Larry, and Larry coached him. He said, what you should be focused on is not the actual championship, is not the winning, but you should be focused on doing the optimal performance at that swing. So whenever you're asked to swing a certain amount of, to launch the ball a certain amount of yards, then the optimal way for you to perform at your best is for you to focus on right now, on the process. So that's step number one. And he says it's important for you to focus on the goal, obviously, because you can't be thinking about someday I'm going to win. No, obviously you want to win. And so what you have to think about is like, okay, I want to win, but the focus isn't on the winning. The focus is on the swinging, right? Focus is not on the winning, it's on the swinging. The second component is that he says, and I'm sure you know this, that 90% of all winners, of all winning, of all competition, 90% of it is pure mental. So whether at work, whether with family, whether in the gym, with your fitness, the people that actually attain the level that they're trying to attain versus the people that constantly fail and struggle and are not able to actually get there is strictly a mental model. Okay, it's a 90% mental game, which really leaves very little for the non-mental game, which is the physical, which is the work input. Because as you and I both know, when you feel very confident about yourself, then you feel unstoppable and you can actually perform and do a lot of things in a very short period of time and do them really well. But if you are doubting yourself, or you're not feeling good, or you're feeling sad, or you're feeling whatever it is, like that's negative, then it's going to impede you from actually performing your best. And so he says there are three ways for you to train your mind, three ways for you to optimize that 90%, three ways. And those three ways are the conscious, so your conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and your self image. So, how do you optimize your conscious mind? It's literally the focus. So he breaks it down into those three things, but then he actually gives a something that is logical and something that you can apply right away, which is the focus part. And what he says is that you should focus on where you want to go. You should focus on what you want to achieve. You should focus on the actual feeling of that win, as opposed to what is stressing you right now. So focusing on that, focusing on you doing your best, focusing on you swinging that perfect swing, as opposed to you thinking about what things you cannot do, or how bad you are, or what stage you are in your life. That is step number one. And he says, in order for you to even do that, he goes even a step further. In order for you to even do that, he says, start by focusing on something you can control immediately, which is your breath. So if you're in a panic, or you feel down, or whatever, you have to understand that the focus of the breath allows you to gain control of the current moment. Once you start gaining control of it, once you slow down your breath, then you're able to then move on to the second step, which is the subconscious mind. And subconscious mind, he says it as a mental rehearsal exercise. So the mental rehearsal, other people have described it as visualization, right? It's a visualization exercise. A lot of athletes go through this. A lot of athletes, before they go into the game, what they do is that they sit down and they actually imagine themselves performing at their absolute best, and they rehearse it over and over again. And they do this during their training as well, and during their time off, is that they just sit down. They have a specific time. If you study athletes, if they have a specific time where they actually sit down and they rehearse them, whether it's boxing, the punch, or whether you're playing chess, or whether you're playing golf or basketball, whatever sport you're in, whatever competitive arena that you're in, you're imagining yourself performing at your best, and you're actually rehearsing the steps. That's the thing that Larry says. He says that rehearsing the steps as if you're actually doing them, not rehearsing, or not thinking about the win, not thinking about the feeling of winning, not, flooding your brain with dopamine, but rather flooding your brain with the mechanism for you to win. So that's the second part. That's the subconscious mind. Okay. So we talked about the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and lastly, it's the self image. And quite simply, he says the self image part is probably the most important skill that you can learn in your life, which is to transform yourself, to transform the way that you look at yourself. And he says the easiest way for you to do that is to understand that you are in an evolutionary process. Right now, when you look yourself in the mirror, you're not looking at the final state of you. You're looking at the transitional state of you, right? So what you're looking at is not the final state, but rather the transitional state. So you're going to get to a better state. And that is something that will reflect on your self-image. When you look at yourself in the mirror, it's not a final game, right? It's not a final game. It's a practice, it's a rehearsal, it's a mental model for you to actually shift yourself to a different kind of self-image. That's it. That is the way for you to perform at your peak performance, for you to understand that it's 90% mental, focus on the primary, make the process the primary focus, and you will win. Have yourself a wonderful day, and we will see you again tomorrow. And as always, keep smiling.